have to. They can if you request them to, they can. They're not obliged.
Okay, that's fine. Let me set up a timer. Okay, we'll start time now. Okay, so is the amnesty coming from the nation, like the new government that's being set up, or is it like international courts or whatever? Or something?
Um, the amnesty here has come from the nation that are having like the transition of power. Right.
Okay, cool, cool.
Sorry, give me a second. Okay. I can hear you now. Sorry. Can you say something? Do you have any more question?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Hey, sorry. Um, so earlier you said about the like whether like the amnesties come from like the government or like international like organization. So we still keep the stance of like the amnesty come from the government, but the international interference is inevitable in this debate.
Wait,
Sorry,
so
off
does that
second.
mean that like the international courts are also going to give those dictators amnesty?
No. Like the so to clarify, the amnesty come from the rule of law within the within the like the transition government, right? Like there is no legal repercussion in there, and the international court. Oh no, the international community is like inevitably will be interfere in this transition of power.
Like how?
Hmm? What
How?
do you mean?
Like
What do you mean?
what?
Oh,
How are they going to interfere?
to ensure like a smooth transition of power within like a nation.
And that's a part of fiat power?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Okay, that's our prep. We're ready to get started whenever everyone else is.
Yep, I'm ready as well.
Oh, hey guys. Uh, my name is Danny. I'm here. Oh, wait. Hey Judge, do you need us to type down like our position and our name in the uh, group chat?
You're good.
Okay,
I
cool.
just, yeah, I see. So you are the PM, I assume.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then based on process of elimination, I can go from there. So that's good. Go ahead.
Okay. So, hey, my name is Danny. I'm he, him. And I will take POI, but please say the POI verbally. So, because I cannot like focus on the screen at the same time. Um, yeah. And give me a second. Everyone ready?
Ready.
Okay. Yeah. And my speech will start in three, two, one. So, first, our stance is very clear. By offering an amnesty, we provide a pragmatic solution to incentivize the peaceful transition of power and ultimately leading to a better outcomes for the citizen. So, this debate should be judged based on these three key metrics. First, mitigation of harm. So, this debate should be judged on how well either side of the house, how well does our policy reduce suffering and collateral damage to the vast majority of normal population. Um, and second metric is that political stability. Which side can ensure a better peaceful transition and stable transition of power for these vulnerable nation to become a more democratic nation in the transition of power? And thirdly is the long-term institutional development. How does each approach contribute to building a lasting democracy in democratic institution? So let's go through our stakeholder. First, we got the normal citizen of this nation. So the character of the citizen of the nation is they are victims of oppression for a very long time under these the dictator, and they are seeking peace, economic stability, and human rights. So, what are their interests? Their interest is minimizing violence and minimizing economic collapse and political uncertainty. Because after for a very long time, they are living in poverty, they are hungry, they need to make ends meet, of course. Therefore, they need to seek economic stability, political stability, and of course, uh, we as normal human being, we don't want to die. Therefore, we love minimizing violence. The second stakeholders and in this debate is the dictator. So what are their characterization? These are rational actor, okay? Yes, they are dictator. You can love or hate them. However, they are still rational actor. They are capable of thinking rationally, and their primary interest is self-preservation and legacy. They love, benefit. They love, their uh, power and position and wealth. Therefore, it's not easy for them to step down. However, what is their interest? Their interest is avoiding prosecution and securing personal safety and asset. But why would they step down? So dictator can face increasing internal and external pressure, right? For example, we can pick an example of Kim Jong-un, right? He got a lot of economic sanction. His country and himself got a lot of economic sanction from the United States and international community. There's a lot of international isolation and, of course, domestic unrest. Uh, because there might be a lot of faction in the country that are not satisfied with the current status quo. Therefore, they want to overthrow him, that person. Therefore, the regime can oftenly become financially unsustainable, and the risk of being overthrown violently can grow over time. So, amnesty offer a guaranteed peaceful transition exit strategy that ensure their safety and legacy. And the third stakeholder in this debate is the international community, right? So the characterization is these are like watchdog that concern with human rights and geopolitical stability. They might be, non-governmental organization or even multinational governmental organization. So what are their interests? Their interest is encouraging a peaceful transition while upholding justice. So let's go through our main contention. So our first claim is that amnesty can provide a powerful incentive for dictator to relinquish the power peacefully. So dictator, because they are facing the threat of prosecution, they can cling to power at all costs, can leading to like a prolonged conflict that can and having devastating consequence to their citizen. But offering amnesty is give them like a pathway to exit without fear of retaliation. So, what is the mechanization of this? By implementing clear framework that guarantee, let's say, from a credible third-party organization, let's say just like the UN, dictator can be assured of their safety. Additionally, economic incentive and asylum arrangement can be structured for the departure to be more appealing. Yes, amnesty is being provided from their own nation, but however, the third party which is the international community is inevitable to step in to assure the smooth transition of power, which can include providing safe passage in this case. What is the impact? So the impact is prevent civil war, of course, it can prevent coup and mass casualty that can arise from those. Uh, yeah. So our second claim is that it can lead to like an immediate improvement in the citizens' lives. So when dictator cling to power, there's a lot of economies deteriorate. There's a lot of human rights abuse can escalate, and essential service, like school, hospital collapse. A peaceful transition can allow new leadership to focus on reconstruction and reform without, have to dealing with the ongoing conflict, without dealing with retaliation or scare of retaliation. Um, so what is the mechanization of this? Through transitional governance plans and foreign aid package, for example, they can democratically reform their nation and the citizen can see an immediate improvement in the standard of living. So what's the impact? The impact is that the citizen can benefit from stability and can restore civil liberties much sooner if there's like a drawn out power of struggle occur. And our last claim is that justice can still be achieved through truth and reconciliation. Justice is not based solely on punitive. Like, justice is not like you have to punish the bad guy to achieve justice. It can take form of truth commission, of reparation, of systemic reform that expose crimes while focusing on national healing. So what is the mechanization of this? By establishing an independent truth and reconciliation with like the backing of civil society, maybe like international community, this can help the victim, the normal citizen, voice their concern, and historical record can be preserved while avoiding retaliatory justice. So is the impact? The impact is that it can prevent a cycle of vengeance and create like an opportunity for a long-term justice without risking immediate upheaval. So by showing that like uh because so based on those key metrics and based on our claim, I believe that our side of the house is better at achieving those three key metrics of mitigation of harm, of political stability, of long-term institutional development. Therefore we proudly uphold this motion. Thank
Okay, I think the PMC for the great speech, and I'll call upon the LOC.
Cool, cool. I'm Oliver, LOC for Wakanda Forever. So order is going to be off case, on case. There'll be some parts of off case which clash quite a bit with the on case. So when that does happen and I'm making cross applications, I'll make that pretty clear. Everyone ready?
Ready?
Sorry. Time starts on my first word. Start at the top with some new characterization. Why would a dictator ever leave office, right? Insofar as it's unconditional when they can step down from power. The only time they'd actually voluntarily leave office and leave power is when they literally can't hold on to power for another day. Why? Insofar as you've chosen to be a dictator probably was, per their characterization, wants to cling on to power, right? They like the benefits of being a dictator and like having all this power, right? So insofar as there's no reason for them to step down when things start to go bad, when they can just ride the wave until they are literally forced to go bad and get the exact same benefits. We tell you it's probably going to happen not before a civil war coup starts off, but well after it, when the government's about to collapse. we'd also say by this characterization that the alternative is instead of have this like forced transition with the international community come in, is let these dictators fall by themselves as the internal mechanisms of the coup work to set up a new government. We tell you that this new government set up without foreign interference is better for two reasons. First is insofar as it's set up by the actual like local people that are in charge of the coup, they know their own interests and can preserve their own values and culture. Secondly, because it's not led by a strong power, there's going to be a lot less of a risk of the puppet state being set up by another country, right? Insofar as it's true, let me tell you, it's a lot less likely that this new government is going to be a dictatorship. People know what systems of government were used in order for control, which means they're going to want the opposite, which means if the dictatorship was super controlling, they're probably going to set up a government which has a lot more personal freedom specifically. Now let's go on to why international supervision doesn't work. There's a couple reasons here. The first is it's just too slow, right? By the time the dictator announces they're going to slow down, the international community has to collaborate, figure out who's going to do what, who's responsible for what money. There's a lot of bureaucracy, not any clear answer to this in terms of, in fact, there's no internal mechanism or one actor that's clear to step in. Secondly, is great power competition, right? Insofar as the international community is going to step, we tell you that the most interested parties are going to be foreign governments that are going to be able to influence that nation in order to be allies to them and be able to take advantage of a country which probably has at least some amount of like geostrategic resources and like importance. Insofar as that's true, they also have the most money and capability to step in. We tell you that this is really bad, right? Because these foreign powers aren't all like beneficial actors. For example, countries like the US and like China, which are the premier global actors and probably going to be the most likely to step in, have clear incentives to set up structures that benefit them and not necessarily other countries, right? They're not necessarily altruistic powers. In fact, we've seen in the past that the US and China have like set up like really terrible like regimes and governments that are like, for example, in Panama, that although they're technically democracies, they're also set up coerced to sign a bunch of agreements in order to give all like the economic benefits of, for example, the Panama Canal to the United States. Insofar as that's true, we tell you that these international powers are not going to be, contrary to their assertion, like they're not going to be like very benefactor. In fact, we tell you it's their incentive to, they're going to prioritize themselves, and that's what history has empirically shown, right? They also have a lot of capability. They can set up puppet states. They can force them to sign deals in order to give away most of their resources at cheap prices insofar, and they can also set up governments that are going to be more sympathetic towards this foreign country than the actual people themselves, which we tell you is going to be the worst case scenario for the long term compared to the alternative when it's the people that are actually able to overthrow the dictatorship and it's the citizens of that country that set up their own government. On that note, couple are contentions here. First contention is a power vacuum. If dictator suddenly being able to leave office without any consequences leaves a massive power vacuum in a system of governments that was already super corrupt. It makes it really easy for potentially new dictators to step in. Couple reasons. Firstly, people around the dictator are probably similar characteristically. They're cool with like the human rights abuses of the dictatorship. That's why they're able to like get up and rise up the ranks. Secondly, because they've already been following the orders of the dictator, they've probably already compromised their morality by committing a bunch of war crimes, right? Insofar as that's true, and you look to our analysis on why the international community takes a lot of time to get there, before the international community is even able to do anything, it's probably going to cause conflicts as the leader steps down. Suddenly, it's like, oh, who's making all the decisions? And people are going to see their opportunity. And insofar as the amnesty clause still applies to them, even if one power is able to become dictatorship, they know or become a dictator. They know that worst case scenario, if the international community has bad pressure, they can also step down, which creates an unparalleled incentive for a massive power conflict to see who can actually get the power because they have a chance of sustaining. In the worst case scenarios, they just step down and get amnesty anyways. This just creates more internal conflict. We tell you that internal conflict amongst in this struggle for power is going to be worse than any coup. Three reasons. Firstly, it's the full resources of the government on both sides, which means the war is probably going to be a lot more brutal and it's not going to have as much guerrilla warfare. It's just going to be full on conflict. Secondly, we tell you that the battlegrounds are probably going to be the most populated cities where the government actually exists and where all the military is the military splits, because that's where they're competing for control in the first place, which means that there's going to be a lot more casualties. Three, literally 100% of the actors, considering it's like a bunch of different warlords vying for power, don't give a shit about human rights, which means they're going to probably be willing to commit a lot worse things than like a revolutionary party committed by people. Second independent argument is that about principle. We'd say that there exists a really important principle of justice, which is that when you do bad things, there have to be reparations. The first is like, it's just how society is built on. Society is built on incentives and disincentives. I can't just like kill 20 people and say, oh, I'm sorry, like I've changed my ways, and then I get off scot-free. A justice system that allows that to happen literally just shields the perpetrator. It doesn't create justice, even if like the victims have been like somehow given reparations. Secondly, insofar as this dictatorship probably kills thousands of people, there's no way you can give reparations to the people that are already dead. The only justice that can exist for the thousands of people that have been killed for the dictatorship, if some kind of consequence. Thirdly, we tell you that fundamentally, insofar as some justice system has to be like set up in this country, a justice system that doesn't actually like punish bad behavior, we tell you is not going to be very just. It means that people are going to be very willing to commit crimes and since there's no justice, because the justice system is more focused on reparations than actually holding people that do wrong accountable, it's going to cause a worse independent institution, right? But then even independently of the principled argument, it also creates a bad perception of the country. Two reasons. Firstly, people like justice across the world. If people think that leaders aren't being held accountable by the government, it means that they're going to be less likely to trust the government and think that the government is siding with the used to be like the ex-dictator, which is going to kill the trust and efficacy in civil government and cause more civil unrest. Secondly, is international pressure, right? Independent democracies are going to be less likely to trade with these countries, to actually engage with these countries, because they think they're just not fair. They think that like the new power, insofar as they're not prosecuting like dictators that are done a lot of evil, aren't actually like super democratic institutions, because the democratic norm actually has the principle of justice as in somehow you hold people accountable. Insofar as this new principle of justice is completely out of line, it's going to cause a lot of pressure both internally with these countries and by the international community to just not engage in and do anything with in regards with free trade. But then let's line by line some individual parts of the Gov case. A lot of it's clash, right? We'll agree with most of their characterization. The problem, let's contest the characterization, however, of the international community. They say it's NGOs and like multi-government corporations, right? We say corporations, if that's true, which we tell you it probably is going to be really bad. Why? Because corporations already have terrible ethics. Big corporations like Nike already use like really cheap labor.
POI,
Slave
POI.
labor. Well, I'm not going to take that. Literally use slave labors in, for example, places like Vietnam where the labor is already cheap. So if they are able to like set up institutions, if they're multi-government national corporations head into these developing countries with no strong government power or regulation, their primary goal is going to be to exploit the labor force as much as possible, creating terrible conditions in the long term. We've already seen empirics. This is just what happens. International corporations are always have the primary obligation to their shareholders and not necessarily to ethics. Then they say like, oh, NGOs and watchdogs will go in with what funding? We tell you that insofar as setting up an entire government requires a lot of funding and a lot of experience. We tell you there's no clear NGO, there's no clear like actual administration. We tell you that that's the most likely actors that are going to come in are actually these multinational corporations and these foreign governments, which also aren't bound by these modes of ethics. Insofar as the international community that's going to be sent in isn't actually altruistic, we tell you that this just turns the internal impacts, right? But then let's go on their arguments that it's an incentive to step down, right? The problem is there's no like conditions on the incentive to step down. You could step down at any time. There's nothing preventing a dictator the day before like foreign troops or like revolutionary troops get to the capital of stepping down then versus stepping down in the beginning, which means the war will have already started. Insofar as that's true, that kills all of their like impacts on preventing the coup in war, because they'll just step down if they start to lose the war. When they obviously, if the war is going on but they think they'll win, they won't step down because they will be able to maintain power. Dictators are always going to prefer maintaining power. It's their characterization. Dictators tend to be really narcissistic, and obviously they want power, which means if there's a chance they can hold on to power, they're going to take it because there's no downside when they can step down at any time. But then on their improvement, right? This entire action is it allows aid packages to come in. Aid packages aren't going to come in if the war has started. But secondly, we tell you reparation isn't good enough. You can cross supply a lot of people already dead. Secondly, we say that like reparation, people aren't necessarily going to be satisfied against it, especially because they'll just perceive that a future government can like backslide into the dictatorship again, and it's going to cause really bad things, and they always have a way out. For these reasons, we strongly oppose.
Okay, thank the LLC for the great speech, and I'll call upon the MG.
Hello, I'm not MG. My pronoun be he, him. I type POI verbally. Just open your microphone and say POI. Yeah, without further ado, right, in a second. Here. Right. Okay. Uh, right. So, my speech will start in three, two. Sorry. My speech will start in three, two, one. If assume that you're put into a situation where the dictator know that they are not be able to fight back the revolution and know that they have really fucked up whatever they've been doing, it's much more reasonable and should prioritize amnesty because it create less diversion. And all of the metric of the statement that has been brought out by my PM is not like tackled or weighted by the first person from the opposition side. Whatever they've been saying, first of all, in my speech, first I'll rebut for the 3 point that they have brought up. Secondly, I'll go to two of my main argument on incentivizing peaceful transitions. And secondly, pragmatisms over justice is in this case scenario, it should be a prioritized. And with that in mind, through all the argument, I'll then wait on you why God win, and third of all, finally I will show you what the analysis of a historical movement from the French revolutions. With all that in mind, first of all, they came up here and they says that there are like why the people why the dictator have to leave, like why would they have to leave the step down? Because first of all, I'll give you threefold on this. First, the like my PM already told you this, but I'll give you more mechanization on this. First, their personal safety and avoidance for prosecutions. One of the strongest incentive for dictators to step down is the guarantee of personal safety. In many cases, dictators feel fear of prosecution. That's why they fight to their last blood. That's why the revolutions, that's why there are so many bloodshed in many revolutions. If they could step down at that point of time, they are provided with legal immunity, ensure that they are not going to face with trial, imprisonment, and punishment. So that's why when they are amnesty, then they will not face any of that, and the bloodshed shouldn't happen in the first time. So this guaranteed will agree that like rather risk like to be overthrown and to be killed rather than face like to so they have all for their personal safety and for their family as well. They have all the like incentive to do so. Secondly, the preservance of the political influence. You either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Many dictators, though stepping down from the formal positions, still can retain some level of influence in the political system. They would actually do so more than the fact that now they're gonna be executed by the revolutions, right? And third of all, international support and exile benefit. Dictators often want to avoid being left isolated on the international stage after stepping down. So this can deal with the included offer of exile in country where dictator is granted a political asylum. With all that in mind, we believe that there is all incentive for these dictators to step down. Now, assume that secondly, you brought up the fact that why it's bad. It's bad because it's benefit them and they would fuck up the country. But that like American and China is going to fuck up the country with international interventions. But that didn't happen in Japan. They rose to become the third largest economy in the world with America help after World War II. Isn't that a two-edged sword if you know how to like step down at the same time? Like after World War II, the government of Japan at that time stepped down. That's when the USA come in and help them rebuild their economy. That's why international intervention is so important. And as you says, I'm trying to flip your case, and as you says, the massive power vacuum and people fighting for that like positions, right? Like twofold. First, this is why international intervention is needed because like these countries have more experience on it and they will help the countries become more of it. Even though it's a win-win collaborations, Japan proved it that they can like survive and become one of the largest economic market in the world. And second of all, the citizen can also make the decision as well, like the France revolutions. Now, before I go into that, you did mention that it's cooperation thing and they want to explore the national thing. I think you misunderstand the PM point. It's nation to nation, not cooperation. So exploitation and all that point is kind of washed. So, and even if they can step down when the revolution came to their door, it still stopped bloodshed. So if you follow the matrix, which is not challenged by the opposition side, then we win on that ballot of protecting more people because we didn't allow bloodshed to happen in the first place, even if they stepped down at that time. So now coming to our argument, first of all, incentivizing peaceful transitions. Reason number one, dictator clinch to the power due to fear of retributions. Why this is true, dictator understand that stepping down can lead to prosecution for human right abuse, financial crime, corruption, many, many more. Without a guaranteed net safety, they are incentivized to maintain power at all costs, even resorting to violence, oppressing measure, and bloodshed. Because of the most reasonable case, the citizens were the one who voted the dictators. So giving them an incentive to step down peacefully would not lead to as much bloodshed. And the impact of this would prolong the suffering. This would prolong the suffering of citizens under authoritarian regimes and leading to increased casualties, economic stagnation, and prolonged fight for democracies. The revolution in France proved this very largely. Second reason is that amnesty reduced the likelihood of violent crackdown or civil war. Amnesty give dictator a way out, removing zero-sum calculations where they perceive stepping down from personal destructions. With immunity, they voluntarily leave the office and like let others take up like their place. Citizens would avoid horrors of protracted conflict, and nation would begin to rebuild under a new government. Second of all, why we should prioritize pragmatism over justice in this situation. First reason is prosecution can create power vacuum, of course. Removing a dictatorship through force and prosecution often leave a leadership void, resulting in chaos and fraction scramble of power. This is especially true in fractal state and weak institutions, where removing strong men abruptly, to revolution killing the leader would leave even more power vacuum than in our side of the house, where like we talk about it and he stepped down putting another man on it. So we actually did a much better job in controlling the power vacuum in our side of the house. Secondly, stability is a higher order priorities than retribution, because justice for past crime, while important, does not outweigh the immediate need for stabilizing the country and protect its citizens. And as we said, so all the metric we should win on this ballot. Now, I'll go briefly through the fact that how the French Revolution and King Louis XVI could have been different, because with the absence of amnesty, Louis XVI case led to a tragic end, not only for him, but for the monarchy as well. A peaceful exit through through the anarchy would spare the French people and the royal family with pain and bloodshed, those who have literally innocent from the reign of terror. People are literally being head chopped because the king is still in control and people are just very chaotic at that point of time. And perhaps the stabilities of the early stage of the revolutions, making the eventual transition to a public less violent in the first place. 40,000 people died at that revolution. Secondly, how does this avoid violent conflict? The French Revolution is through violence. They put people's head on a spike. So we with the amnesty in our side of the house, this mass bloodshed wouldn't happen in the first place. Under the leadership of Robespierre and other radicals, this extreme measure is taken because they are afraid that King Louis would overthrow them. And third of all, international support and exile benefit. After the fall of Napoleon, he was exiled to St. Helena, and his supporters were given immunity. This would give significant alter to post-revolutionary period of the France. So however, giving the dignity and amnesty, it would facilitate a more peace recovery for the French following the revolution. With all that in mind, we believe the government should be a winner of this debate. Thank you.
Okay, I thank the MG for the great speech, and now I call upon the MO.
Given the suffering that they've characterized for the citizens within these dictatorships, the most sacred of the roles of the government, any government in general, is to do equal and impartial justice to all its citizens. That is what we say. What they say is a very funny case that says, on one hand, that these corrupt dictators, these people that have done all these wrongs to the people, should just be let scot-free and just with the belief that they'll step down. That will not happen. That is just a utopian ideology. Let's hear what they say. The framing they give us is that three things are important. Number one, the mitigation of harm, the better transition of the better or peaceful transition, and then also long-term institutional establishment of democracy. Their case is worse and bad for all these three things, and I'm going to show you how this happens. The first contention they give us is about how they've an incentive to relinquish power, because for some reason, the dictator is going to just step down just because, just like that, right? But Oliver tells you that, number one, war would have already happened for them to even start considering stepping down, which means that in the vast majority of instances, these dictators are just not even considering this idea of stepping down because of the characterization that they themselves give us of how dictators are people that love to self-preserve, not just power, wealth, but also their own power, right? But also, we tell you that they will still hold on to this power even in instances of war because they think they're still going to win the war. So we think that even at best, even at worst, these dictators don't even think about stepping down whatever happens, right? Then they say, no, but dictators fear prosecution. Prosecution by who? It's still unclear. Let's consider the kind of actors they give us. Number one, the international community. We're still unclear who the international community is because they say it's not the MNCs that we already told you about how they have the incentive to have no ethics, how they exploit labor, and they don't respond to that. But even if the international community was the International Criminal Court of Justice or whatever it is, we think that we've already shown you in our first speech and Oliver's speech how that much of itself is very slow. It's not effective. We gave you many links to show you why it's not even going to work. Okay, let's say that they're saying that it's the people, the national courts within these dictatorships that are going to do this. Three reasons why it won't work. It's because these dictators have access to the courts. They have all the power and command of the armies. That means that you cannot necessarily prosecute them in any way. So they don't fear at all. So the fear that they talk about does not exist. The fear they talk about is something that cannot justify why these dictators are going to step down. The impact of this rebuttal then is that their main argument on how then they're going to be able to relinquish the power of these people is that it doesn't remain true for any reason whatsoever. Secondly, they told us how then they're going to immediately improve the quality of life of their citizens. But this is not well mechanized. They don't show us how this is going to happen because it's just number one, we just grant them amnesty. Number two, dictator step down. Number three, immediately the quality of lives improves. Oliver gives you analysis to show you why the most likely alternative, even if this happens, even if it's true that like the dictator steps down, the more likely alternative is that there's going to be a power vacuum. What this means is that number one, a new dictator can step in and all the harms that we've been talking about continue to happen. So it becomes just a cycle of harms. Number two, conflict can actually happen between like different people after they want to fight to be the next power whatsoever. That in and much of itself is something that is worse. Why is it better on our side? Our alternative that we gave you is that these dictators should just fall by themselves and then face their demise and experience their trauma and karma of the actions that they've been committing. The reason why this is better is because when the people do it or when organic change happens, it happens in such a way that it establishes itself such that there is no power vacuum that is left. The initiator of this kind of change usually becomes the way that usually finds a way to establish the new leadership without any kind of qualms. We think that we don't have that kind of vagueness that they have on their side. Let's go on then to hear what else they tell us. We think they give us a very big contradiction because number one, they tell us that dictators are very narcissistic people. They want to self-preserve. But the crux of their case at the same time is that they should be given this freedom to say, we want to step down. We don't think that is in the nature of dictators. Anyway, having said that, there is nothing else that is left to rebut in their case. Everything has been dealt with. What did we tell you? We told you that in principle, that justice is something that is important. We told you that is each person must be rewarded for the kind of actions that they do. They already gave us in their own speech how these people commit a lot of crimes, how they make the citizens suffer, not just economically, but also politically because there is no political stability. There are a lot of things like harms to freedom whatsoever. We think that these are things that should not be just let go scot-free. Because at worst, if this dictator, even if they step down, if things don't improve after that, it means the citizens have suffered under their tenure for nothing. It means that whatever harms that had happened before are number one, not paid for. Number two, it means that there is a precedent to continue those harms within the normal lives of the people. So number one, they let all those bad things happening slide. Number two, they set a precedent for more unaccounted actions and offenses and more corruption, even for the next government that is going to follow after that. But it's bad for peaceful transition. Let's characterize what peaceful means. We don't think that peaceful is just within the context of fighting and within just the context of war. We think peace also is should be characterized as inner peace. We don't think the people are going to have inner peace within themselves, knowing that they have a person that had been harming them for years and now they are going scot-free. That is just at best if their policy even succeeds at first. So it means they don't have that peace at their best within the citizens. They know that there is a person who was suppressing them for some time who just decided, I am done. I just want to leave and nothing is going to happen to me. They don't have the assurance that the next dictator who's taken power, if at best again, it happens without any fight and without any conflict, they still don't have that peace. We think that the peace that, the inner peace is more important than the peace they talk about, because it's a peace that eats you up from inside. It's a peace that doesn't exist on their side. But we think their side is worse for the establishment of democracy, because it's not organic. We think democracy exists more when there's like organic change. But finally, it's worst for reducing suffering. On the comparative, we think we support whatever they were talking about when the French chopped their king's head. We think that that was good because they did the change themselves, and now France is in a better government than it would have been if that person, whatever, Louis King, whatever, had stepped down. Because number one, he wouldn't even have stepped down at all. The kind of harms that they were facing would still have existed because he didn't think he was going to lose. We think the reason why they even got to that extent was because of all that. Now, let's step back a bit and go back to the criteria they gave us. They told us that number one, they mitigate against harm. What kind of harm do they mitigate against? None. We don't mitigate against just physical harm within like the kinds of like violence and this. We also mitigate against inner violence through our principle of justice. On their side, they like reward things like corruption, things like violence. They reward people for like very bad things, and they don't let them face the justice. We think that inner peace is important. Finally, we don't think they have any better transition according to their own metrics. We think that all the kinds of things we told you are very likely because of the nature of these nations. There's going to be violence, there's going to be power vacuums. But finally, we think that you can establish any democracy using such kind of a policy. We favor justice too.
Okay, I think the MO for the great speech, and now I call upon the LOR.
Sweet. It's just gonna be ballots. I'll signpost as I go. Everyone ready?
Ready?
Great. Let's start at the top with some key pieces of conceded characterization. The first thing that our opponents concede out of MG is that there's fundamentally like no actual incentive as to when these dictators want to step down. That's why you prefer our analysis that insofar as the dictators want to preserve power for as long as possible and getting amnesty symmetrical no matter when you do it, it means they always have the incentive to step down as late as possible. What does this actually look like? It means that they're already mid-coup, mid-war. They've just started to lose, and that's when they step down. That is uniquely what causes the power vacuums we talk about, because insofar as the leader suddenly and very abruptly steps down, it means that the other governmental forces that are already fighting, there's going to be a leadership vacuum. Who's leading the armies? Who's going to be able to grab the dictatorships? There's also a clear incentive for people to actually try to grab the power of dictatorship, because if they're able to like go to power and they continue to lose the war, they can just step down and get the amnesty anyways. So here's the impacts, right? Insofar as they also can see that the international community is slow acting, it means that it's going to be very easy for like these like future wars to happen, or because of the civil unrest and conflict, because there's literally nothing that is able to stabilize it. However, on the counter side, while these coups and civil wars that have already started are able to organically overthrow the government, it means the government has already been overthrown, the governmental armies have already been defeated, and that's when the organic change is able to happen. That's why it's a better solution. Specifically, even if it doesn't happen, even if you still get like that there once that the war extends, right? They concede key pieces of weighing as to why an internal conflict is worse than like a civil war, right? Why? Because the power. Let's look at the power grab weighing. The first is that it happens in like centers of government. Not all of the fighting is going to be happening, which is primarily like in rural areas, which is guerrilla warfare, which is the primary tactic these like rebellions tend to use because they tend to be more underfunded. Insofar as the majority of the fighting happens in more populated areas, there's more casualties, which is a clear weighable impact, right? Secondly, like we tell you that there's no actual guarantee that these subsequent dictatorships are actually going to fall in the first place, insofar as it's not an organic change, and like the subsequent dictatorships could like cause massive amounts of damage to other forms of infrastructure. There's no guarantee that things actually get better. But then let's go take them at the best case scenario and assume that the dictators just step down immediately, like before a war starts. We tell you they're still not winning this case scenario either. And the problem is they don't really engage with the characterization debate as to what the international community looks like. Their only form of debate is just like, oh, here's an example. It happened really well in Japan. The problem is twofold. The first is they don't engage in the incentive structure debate. that in a time of great power competition, when the US is specifically competing with China right now for global supremacy, and these countries could very well have some kind of resource or geopolitical like strategic benefit, that is going there, that these governments are going to have the incentive to set up puppet regimes in order to ensure that they have this conflict. Their Japan empiric doesn't beat this for two reasons. The first is that there's no incentive why, or there's no like actual warning as to why Japan is applicable here. Secondly, we give our own empiric, which is this is what happened in Panama. The Panama empiric is substantially better than the Japan empiric because it's A, more recent, and B, was happening in the middle of the Cold War, which is a clear time of great power competition, while the very end of World War II did not have the same level of great power competition as exists today or did exist in the Cold War, which is when the US was overthrowing a bunch of like Latin American governments. Insofar as that's true, we tell you that the corporations that are going to come in are going to be substantially worse than any given dictatorship for a couple of reasons. The first is that they're going to be engaged in the same practices, right? Insofar as they're going to, like, multinational corporations have absolutely no incentive to be ethical, and in various cases they've been very unethical. For example, Nike using slave labor in Vietnam, which also goes conceded, it's going to create these exact same conditions except worse because there's no actual internal mechanism to get rid of these multinational corporations. They tend to be very well funded by their own governments, which tend to be usually the US or China, which have their own interest in protecting these powers. There's no real way you get rid of them in the first place. Insofar as that's true, we tell you that there's no actual marginal benefit there. So we take both scenarios where the dictator drops out exactly the way they want them to drop out, to which the subsequent government is not going to be in any way democratic. The only way we actually get a fair and democratic government is if we get the actual citizens of that country, which have their own self-interest to set up that government by actually winning the coup. And if the dictator steps down in the middle of a massive conflict, which is our characterization, which was also conceded, it's just going to create more power vacuums, which cause further war and destruction. Thus, we oppose.
Okay, I thank the LOR for a great speech. I now call upon the PMR.
Hey. So I would do some let's say clarification first, then doing some rebuttals, then doing some weighing. I have 5 minute 30, right?
Yep, 5:30.
Cool. So, okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So this debate has been plagued with the misunderstanding, mishearing, and the ignorant from the upside. So once again, let me clarify the characterization of these stakeholders. So first is the let's talk about the dictatorship, right? These dictator, what are they? They are rational agent. They are rational being, right? So despite all the brutality that they have done, they are rational actors. So yes, sure, they are losing, but they want to preserve their life too, and they will, because as any rational actor will react, will do, they will react to incentive. And what are these amnesty policy? They are incentive for these rational actor, which is dictator, to step down. And of course, we have proved, I have talked to you in my PM our speech our speech that why the dictator would step down because of, I don't know, of internal and external pressure, and of course economic sanction and whatever else. So yes, let's use the example from the upside that if the dictator would are losing like one day away from the rebels to like invade the capital, they would step down. And in that moment, they would still giving them amnesty to guarantee a less bloodshed scenario, which benefit our stakeholder. And I would have to say again, my definition, my framing of the international community did not include these corporations. I don't know why did you hear it. If it's because of my accent or because of my voice, my apology for that. So therefore, I don't think the point about the corporation just simply makes sense. So let's talk, and also their point about yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of the rebuttals for my speech. Um, First is on Okay, so first is on justice and practical peace, right? So the opposition have always argued about, the amnesty just undermines justice by just giving the dictator to escape scot-free and then can, set a dangerous precedent on, the future autocrat, right? But our response is that, yes, the pursuit of justice is important, But however, justice is not just simply, you punishing a guy for what he do, but also it must be weighed against the practical need for peace and stability. So all the opposition has tried to say that we did not give the mechanization for why the life of the citizen is better with these amnesty policy, but the simple fact that no violence is just make their life already like 10 times better, right? A dictator facing like an inevitable prosecution will resort to like extreme measure to retain power, which can lead to prolonged violence and suffering. So in our world, instead, we prioritize a transitional justice mechanism, such as reparation. So there's no more bloodshed, which is like 10 times better, making our citizen like 10 times better already. So the second rebuttals is on incentive for the dictator, right? So the opposition just contend that offering amnesty can create like a moral hazard, right? Like incentivizing dictator to just keep committing atrocity without fear of consequence. But dictators are not. They are a rational being, right? They are not just primarily motivated by amnesty offers. They act based on self-preservation. So our policy leverage this instinct by providing them the control of peaceful exit option. Um, so so our side provides us a more concrete solution than the status quo or their side of the world. So our third class is the long-term stability and democratic growth. So the opposition just keep claiming that the prosecuting dictator just deter a future authoritarian regime and create like an organic growth and can, right? However, in the reality, the prosecution first approaches lead to power vacuum and civil war and instability. In their MO speech, they talk about how the French King Louis scared of stepping down because he's scared of being executed. Yes, that's the reason why we provide the amnesty policy in the very first place. So, and also these amnesty, because they are being watched by the international community, they being surveilled by the international community, is giving like a conditional requirement for democratic reform. Like, yeah, we give amnesty to this guy, but this guy, if he just keep becoming a dictator, we're not gonna like providing aid, providing support, or anything else for democratic growth. So our policy just like create a more forward-looking solution that encourage the gradual democratization rather than risking an immediate chaos and regression for like another authoritarianism regime. Because yeah, organic growth, yeah, maybe the next guy will be a dictator or the next guy would be a Democrat. We don't know. Therefore, why the Gulf ballot is the ballot for peace and for the safety, for the life of the normal citizen. Therefore, I proudly to uphold. Thank you.
Okay, I thank the PMR for a great speech, and I thank everyone for a great round. So this time, I'm going to ask everyone to leave this breakout room, go to the main room, and the wings and I will deliberate, and then call you back in when we have a decision.
Sounds good. Great round, guys. Thanks for judging.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, no, leave breakout.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Um, so let's take maybe 2.5 minutes to look over our flow. Sound good?
Sure.
All right, so I'd love to know your all's thoughts. Whoever wants to go first.
I guess I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I was more convinced by Ops' point because I feel like, especially the point about multinational corporations, I feel like that is a really important character in this debate. And even though Gov didn't explicitly mention it, I still think that it should be weighed in this debate. And overall, I was just a lot more convinced by what they had to say.
Benjamin, what about you?
Um, I weighed Gov slightly higher, mostly for the moral framework of the precedent being set. I think both of them hit it. Um, yeah, I think both sides attacked that pretty evenly. I couldn't really come up with a good winner for that. For personal safety or not for the dictator, whether or not the dictator is a rational actor, that I felt Gov slightly made a better argument that over Op that um being a rational actor, you wouldn't wait till necessarily the last second. There could be other reasons that you would step down. Um, the future dictators may try to take over. Elo said something about uh, the power vacuum would lead to more people trying to take over the country, but I don't like within the country. But I don't see how that helps Op because that sort of would just mean there's probably more bloodshed through the non-IR intervention route, but neither side really touched upon this super hard after that I noticed, unless somebody else saw something. So I wasn't sure who to weigh that to. The biggest thing it came down to was um, who the stakeholders, the citizens, and I felt that Gov made a better argument that they would be protected for who is the international relation and will they hurt the citizens. This sort of just came down to like this back and forth between Japan and France, and I think PMR's um, amnesty policy is used to avoid the bloodshed of the French Revolution. I think that PMR point sort of said it for me that it was yeah, that they edged it out a
Yeah,
bit more,
so,
but yeah.
yeah, thank you both for your thoughts. I always like to start hearing what the wings think because I never want, when I'm in a chair position, I don't want to like influence what you have to what you're thinking. So I appreciate y'all going first. Um, yeah, so this was a weird one, because I think this is a little bit of a classic case of you have like maybe an LO, maybe the MO2 is like maybe technically more experienced in debate, but their speeches are very much like brrr, and like he's saying so many things all at once, and they don't really come together to form a complete picture. Because ultimately, like Ops has a lot of things that exist in the round, but there's something that comes in the LOR, which I think is like shows why sort of the foundation of their case is a little bit shaky. And that is, well, we're arguing that a organically led coup is a preferable option to amnesty. And the logical jumps you have to make to that are there, but I'm not sure they're quite convincing. So my sense is that Ops' main thrust, and based on what I have written down, is that look, the amnesty is not going to be accepted by the dictator until the dictator is in a position where the amnesty is the dictator's final option. And the reason they give for this is because dictators tend to be narcissistic and hold on to power. Now, of course, I agree that dictators tend to be narcissistic and they tend to hold on to power. But I also agree with Gov that in the characterization that they're rational actors and they want to preserve their life. And I think something that comes out of the MG, which I think is rather strong, is that the reason um, dictators tend to make abusive measures and hold on to their power so frequently in situations like this is because they're afraid of prosecution and they figure, well, I have no way out other than holding on to power, so I'm going to continue to do this stuff. And so, like with Op, I get a lot of arguments about like, okay, you know by the time the amnesty is accepted, you're already going to have a massive bloody conflict. Um, and they say this because, like, for some reason, like this is like not clearly articulated like at all, by the way, but like Ops' main thrust here is that somehow there's going to be an intra-governmental civil war where there's two sides of the military, and that's worse than like a guerrilla conflict, which is what they're advocating for. First of all, deeply unclear to me how either of those are unique to either side in this case. It's unclear to me why the decision or not to do amnesty is what is affecting whether or not there is a like break in the military versus like a guerrilla insurgency. Like presumably, depending on which country we're talking about, the context and the different parties at stake are going to be different in every case, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, Op hasn't given me a clear reason as to why this sort of very specific worst kind of bloodshed is happening because of amnesty. I think to me, it depends on the specific country. And so what I can do here as a judge is I can weigh on probability from Gov, which is that even if there's only a 1% chance we can prevent any kind of conflict through amnesty, and given that Gov has given me arguments about how certain dictators are going to, accept that to preserve their own life and also to preserve their legacy, they seem like a hero. My mind, I'm not voting on this, but my mind immediately jumps to General Pinochet in Chile, right? Pinochet actually stepped down as a result of a popular, it wasn't because of amnesty, but he stepped down because of a popular reform. And some Chileans actually still see him as a hero because even though he was a brutal dictator, he stepped down in I mean, it's a little complicated, but a largely peaceful manner. There were certainly some political violence and crackdown. So on the legacy point, because like all the stuff about like great powers and multinational corporations, like if I'm wrong, please call me out, but I'm unsure how op proves that that is unique to gov side of the house, right? Like because presumably in op's best case where a like people's led guerrilla armed insurgency is totally successful, um why is there more of a chance for there to be an independently established democracy than in the case where you have the UN presiding? Because Gov notably also makes a point in PMC about how such a violent conflict is going to lead to the collapse of state necessary institutions like schools, healthcare, uh, tax collection systems, etc. And so even if there is a marginally more risk, marginally more of a chance that we prevent any conflict, and certainly the least, we prevent the most brutal kind of conflict on Gov, I'm inclined to vote Gov. That's sort of how I thought about the round, but yeah, because like I agree with you that like multinational corporations are a big issue, but again, unsure how those are made unique. Also a little unsure frankly, that like in a world like because I think Op is right and that there is great power competition. Um, but again, I don't understand. It's never clearly articulated to me why the amnesty is what is changing the uniqueness for that. Now, I think actually the closest Gov gets is out of the MO when we get arguments like that clearly expand upon the justice arguments and how this could set bad precedent into the future with things like corruption and institution building and lack of trust and discontent among the population. I think that was the most compelling part of the op, and that's why I'm inclined to give the highest op rank to the MO. However, like you know, that wasn't super heavily weighed. I mean, there wasn't a lot of explicit weighing this around, period. But absent weighing, I am weighing prevention of death, destruction, and violence over the marginal increase in risk of corruption and institution building brought on by the amnesty of the dictator. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. So barring any disagreement, I think that's where I'm going to cast the ballot. So speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, that makes so much sense because I feel like Op did say like a lot of points, but they didn't really clearly tie together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so Danny was the PM, right? And then we had,
Yep.
Let's see.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Then LO was Oliver, MO was Lassetti. So okay. So okay, tell me what you think about this. PM1, MO2, MG3, LO4, they all get 30s.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay. We're just waiting on one person, right?
My partner went to get food. He said he'd still be on the Zoom. Let me call him real quick, see if I can get him on the Zoom. Elsewise, we can probably just start. Give
Okay.
me a minute. Okay, he said he'd join, so I'm assuming he's in the process of doing that now.
No worries.
Okay, my partner just got here. He can hear
And
on my,
just listen from yours.
yeah.
All right. So the way I normally do this, I give call RFD, and then we'll do ranks. That's good. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we ended up voting government. There's some reasons why. So I'm gonna be frank because I can be a little blasé and I'm very direct. I think this was a case of Op said was perhaps very like had a lot of technical experience when it comes to debate and said a lot of things and said a lot of warrants. But I'm not sure they come together to form a coherent ballot for me, and they're not successfully outweighed against the Gov arguments. So let's get into the Gov thrust, which I think is rather simple, which is that when you provide amnesty to dictators, it provides an incentive for them to step down, which reduces violence, death, bloodshed, and improves institution building within countries that have dictators going into the future. I think this is pretty well articulated throughout the Gov speeches, right? We have the stakeholders of citizens, the dictator, and the international watchdogs at large. Those are our three main stakeholders. I think both sides agree that citizens generally want the least amount of violence, bloodshed. People generally want democracy. They want human rights. They want freedom. There's not a lot of disagreement there. Fine. I think where the crux of this debate comes down to is how the dictators react. The op thrust is kind of multifaceted, and that is okay. So when we provide amnesty to dictators, right? It's not going to really do anything except at a last resort. Dictators will not step down um, until that is their last possible option. That I think that's ops best case. So let's meet them where they're at in terms of that best case, right? Okay. So in that scenario, right, what I hear from Gov, and this is a response I heard of MG, is that okay, in such scenarios, we'd at least rather have the amnesty in policy because therefore that's going to reduce the amount of the most severe, most brutal actions that dictators take in order to maintain their power, right? So even in a case where the dictator is going to lose either way, you want to give them that out because on the way out, they're going to cause a shit ton of violence. They didn't use this example, but like when I was adjudicating, just my mind went to like Bashar al-Assad, right? Like how he used chemical weapons against his own people, sort of like things like that, right? And like ops has like a lot of things like warrant after warrant after warrant after warrant after warrant, but then it all comes back to something I hear out of LOC that gets kind of continued in LOR, which is like lurking behind all of what they say, which is that the alternative that op proposes that's better is like a people's-led guerrilla insurgency, which will install a superior government as opposed to like a intra-governmental conflict where like half the military is on one side, half the military is on another. There's going to be more bloodshed. What I think the issue is that op never proves the uniqueness as to why granting amnesty is what is leading to guerrilla conflicts versus intra-governmental, like full-on civil war. Right, because presumably it's going to be different for each country, each context, and each, specific instance about which we are talking. And like, frankly, a lot of the arguments made about like multinational corporations and great power competition also, I don't think are ever proven unique because like in a case, even when I take ops best case and a new democratically installed government is set up by a guerrilla revolution, there is presumably still a lot of there's a big chance for China or the US or Nike or some corporation to step in and insert their dominance because the characterization I hear from op explicitly is that great power competition exists in like whether like great power competition exists, it will continue to exist. There's the US and China. So I'm unclear why granting amnesty or not is the deal breaker here, especially when Gov tells me that, okay, like, sure, maybe the wheels of change at the international organization level turn slowly, but they do change. And we would rather have institutions like Human Rights Watch, the UN, et cetera, look over this transition of power and be presiding over this amnesty deal, as opposed to like some violent guerrilla-led revolution wherein the dictator is going to be backed into the corner at the very end. The dictator is losing either way, but it's a zero-sum game, so the dictator just does like the most violent method possible. I think the closest op gets is what actually comes out of the MO, which I think is the mostly expanded upon in the MO, which is that, look, when you grant amnesty, you're risking the chance of long-term political efficacy by undermining trust with the people, leading to potential wide-scale corruption and just general lack of trust in the government, which can be very detrimental to democracy and allow for like these sort of things to happen again. Like again, I think this is the closest op gets because I think it is it is something that is brought upon by the unique leverage point that is granting amnesty. You understand, right? So, however, like frankly, there's not a lot of explicit weighing done in this round, but implicitly, right, I'm willing to vote on like Gov's arguments, which is just like it is better to prevent imminent death, destruction, harm, violence of people whose main interest is survival, as opposed to the marginal increase in risk of like corruption and like bad political institutions in the future once the dictator gets amnesty. However, I think that's also a little bit beaten back by what we hear out of the PMC and in the MG, which is that, and the PMR, which is that dictators also care about their legacy. And like for that reason, a lot of times they will buy into this in a narcissistic sense to like improve their legacy and seem like a hero, which can actually lead to more trust. Again, historically, my mind went to the case of like General Pinochet in Chile. Again, it's not a perfectly applicable example, and I don't vote on examples that I think of in my own head because that would be interventionist, but it is where my mind went. Sort of like Pinochet stepping down rather peacefully, and some Chileans even still viewing him as sort of like a, not by no means all, but like some view him as still sort kind of like a venerable figure in that sense. So for all those reasons, we voted Gov. If there are no other questions, I will get into ranks. Okay. I didn't hear any, I don't see any questions. So, I don't see Gov here. So, or I don't see Op here. So, Gov, are you good hearing ranks?
Yeah, we're okay.
All right. So, I gave the 1 to the PM, the 2 to the MO, the 3 to the MG, and the 4 to the LO. Good luck. Hope, and if this is your last round, I don't know if it is or not. Hope it was a great tournament and have a great day.
Can I ask something before you go?
Yeah,
About
yeah.
feedbacks?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so before going to personal feedback, so I brought, so what do you think about the structure that I proposed this time? So first I'll go through rebuttals, and then I go through the main argument of our team, and then I analyze the two argument in a term of historical concept. How you feel?
Yeah, I think the use of historical examples is interesting. I would maybe devote slightly less time to them because in APDA, really the core importance is about warranting and not examples. Examples are fine, but I would try to loop in the examples into your rebuttals of the warranting up in the earlier parts of the speech rather than devoting specific independent parts of your speech to the examples because examples tend to be like examples are fine, but like judges don't usually vote on examples.
Okay, cool.
But overall, it was a good speech.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, and another
Hey,
thing.
sorry.
How you?
Yeah.
Dude.
Hey, it's the PM. Sorry. Yeah, can you give me like how can I improve my speech and like how's the structure of this?
Personal feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, so frankly, guys, I gotta go really soon.
Okay.
But overall, your speech was really good. I think generally, how you can improve is specifically in the PMR. I would have liked to see, like
Way.
more.
Okay, yeah.
Well, so two things. I would like you to explicitly define what your ballots are more. You went hard for the one specific ballot of dictators stepping down more peacefully, which is fine, but I would have liked to see more explicit weighing in terms of the impacts of that as opposed to the impacts brought up by Op. And I would have liked to see you call out more of the non-uniqueness of a lot of Op's claims.
All right, thank you
But
so
overall,
much.
it was a great speech.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for judging.
You're welcome.
Did
All
you
right.
see a chat, Robbie?
Howdy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the ranks again. The 1 was given to the PM, the 2 to the MO, the 3 to the MG, and the 4 to the LO. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna head out. If not, you can message me on Messenger or send me this DM on Discord if you have any questions. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
See you.